get a good night's sleep? No? Me either. We were at Chris and Melissa's last night, and we did the polar plunge. The water was like 38 degrees. I went in it for about 3 minutes, and Chris was like, just so you know, this might keep you up tonight. It did. I was up till about 3:30. Could not sleep. But it felt good, I have to be honest. It was, I would do it again, just maybe not at 8 o'clock.
Not in the winter time.
Honestly, I would do it in the wintertime. It would probably feel good in the summer. It might be more shocking in the summer. When you step out and it's the same temperature, the water's the same temperature as the air, it's not so bad. Actually, it kind of feels nice outside then. All right, are we done, Dan? Okay. Okay, well, did everybody read Deuteronomy 9 and 10? Show of hands, who read it? So the four faithful, Mr. and Mrs. Hop, Mr. and Mrs. Commandon. I'm going to start giving points for that, I think. Little award points if you read it, and then if you have something that stood out that you shared, because I have to legitimize that you actually read it. Yeah, you can't just say you read it and then be like, oh, nothing stood out. So did anything stand out in chapter 9 and 10?
I think it's chapter 9, I can't remember which chapter, but one is pretty specific that the tribe of the Levites were going to carry the Ark of the Covenant.
And they didn't get the blessing. Like, they didn't get, it's interesting, Keith and I were talking about that. It's like, so what blessing did they get? We did a little bit of research on it. It's kind of interesting what, why didn't the Levites give an inheritance? Hable tends to regard the ideology of the exclusion of the Levites from land inheritance as a privileging of the Levites. Like, it was a privilege.
Yeah.
In that they didn't. The landless elite who have power over the landed tribes, the divinely ordained heirs of Moses, who act of God as God's representative in the land. You know, in our minds, we're like, how can that be a blessing not to get an inheritance, you know what I mean, of the land, but it really actually was.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
And maybe they didn't get an earthly reward.
Right?
There may be
They did.
a reward laid up in heaven for them. That was a pretty big deal.
Also, they were, there were certain places where they were supposed to live, and they took care of them, even though they didn't possess them generally.
Yeah. It was a pretty big deal just to be able to touch the Ark of the Covenant.
Well, if anybody else touched it, they died.
Yeah.
And that happened, remember it fell? And
Yeah.
people reached out to grab it, to keep it from
Yeah.
hitting the ground, and they died because they
died
touched it
for
because they weren't supposed to touch it. They were trying to do a good thing.
Yeah,
They were trying to catch it, but they weren't supposed to touch it.
but it also wasn't being transported properly. It was supposed to be with staves, not on the
Right.
cart. So,
And
Also
also,
by the priests,
yeah,
not,
yeah.
yeah, he wasn't a priest.
Right. Just kind of shows the seriousness of
Yeah.
obedience to the Lord's law.
Obedience is
Yeah.
the very best way.
Another thought that came out about it was because, it says, why were the Levites not allowed land? And it says because they were to serve. That was their job, was to serve. And how, us in our lives, are we serving God, or are we, caught up in the things that we get physically?
Yeah.
anyway.
Would you sell everything you had and leave
Right.
like Leelanau?
Right?
Go where the Lord called you?
Right.
Just sell what you had and just leave? Or not even possess land? Just
Right.
trust that He'll have a place for you to stay? We get we're pretty comfortable. Kind of have what we want, what we need. Well, was there anything in chapter 10 that stood out? I have to be honest, I didn't read chapter 10 this week. I failed. I only read chapter 9. Nothing really? Alright. We'll give the four faithful a point. And next week, we'll be reading 11 and 12. So, read it. I like it. I think it's interesting. I think it goes along with the Sunday school well, and you can kind of I feel like I'm reading Deuteronomy in a different way this time as I read through it. I'm kind of catching more from it. I'm enjoying it, so I would encourage everyone else to do it. Okay, so what did we talk about last week? If we review, what was our topic that we spoke about last week? Does anybody know? Mr. P.
Well, I think you had Christ's summary of the Ten Commandments. And do you want me to go further? Or
Yeah, if you can, keep going. I'll give you a point.
Well, I mean, you had Christ, the thoughts were Christ's summary of the Ten Commandments, and then you had, one point was love to God, and then the second point was, circumstances of God's love. I believe.
Yeah, so we talked about Christ's summary of the law, which was, what was Christ's summary? One word.
Love.
Love.
Ooh, Mrs. Hopguy.
Yeah.
Love was the word that Christ summarized the law in. And we talked about loving the Lord with all your heart, soul, and mind. And that was what Christ's response to the lawyer that asked him, what is the greatest commandment? That was his response first, was to love the Lord with all your heart, your soul, and your mind. So that is correct. Mr. P gets a point. That's 2 points already this morning. We're just getting started. So, I kind of briefly told you, but what are we talking about today? The second response that Christ gave to the lawyer.
What is the chief duty to all commandments? Or not? That's what
Well,
last week.
when the lawyer asked what's the greatest commandment, he said to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And the next one was
Love your neighbor as yourself.
love your neighbor as yourself. Mrs. B gets a point.
I know.
I like how you brought out that, those are the Ten Commandments. The first, you know what I mean? That is, like, it's cool to see, like, how God intertwined the Ten Commandments. They're not different. You know what I mean? You think of this new law. Yeah, there's a new law. Love the Lord thy God, and then love thy neighbor. But really, it's the same because those Ten Commandments were broken down
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah, if you break them down, that's what they're broken into.
Yeah,
They're summarized by love.
yeah.
All right. So, we ought to love our neighbor as ourselves. Who are we referring to when we say neighbor? Who is that in reference to?
The people we're around each and every day.
People
It
we're
doesn't have
around?
to be the person you're living next to. It could be
Yeah,
people
absolutely.
you go to church with, people you see at the grocery store that you know that they're talking about. People by in passing.
I like that first answer you gave, the people we're around every day. That's a good answer.
You know, and I think
Yeah,
everybody,
everyone. That's what I wrote down, yeah. Everyone is our neighbor. We're gonna look at that, see what scripture has to say. I like Daniel's response of people we're around, because that's the people we have an effect on. It's the ones we're around. They see our actions and they hear our words. And we can reflect Christ to them, or we can reflect a bad testimony to them. And if we're obedient to the Ten Commandments and reflecting Christ, we will treat them with love. This is how.
in our meeting, Deuteronomy 10:19, it says, love ye therefore the stranger, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt.
Yeah, I think we're actually gonna come to that verse at some point today, but yeah. I was gonna bring it out and then I wasn't, because we were gonna read it later, but love ye therefore the stranger, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. So, let's go ahead and look at some scripture. We'll start out with sword drill, because I like doing that first. So our first one will be a sword drill, and then we'll start in the front. Everybody's got their Bibles. Somebody's got to beat Chris. He's pretty much won the last 2 in a row. You have your phone?
No, he can't use it.
Okay.
He's disqualified. What?
All right, we're going to go to Exodus 23:4. Go.
Got it.
Holy cow.
Nice job, Chris.
I was still opening my Bible. All right, Chris, would you read Exodus 23:4, please?
If thou beat thine enemy's ox or his ass going astray, thou shalt surely bring it back to him again.
So if you meet your enemy's wildlife or their cattle or whatever, their livestock, you should surely bring it back to him again. So you should return what belongs to your enemy. All right, we'll go ahead and start in the front. So I don't know, Megan or Matthew, would you guys read Proverbs 24, verse 17? I'll make sure Chris gets a point.
24, 23, did you say?
24:17, Proverbs.
Rejoice not when thine enemy falleth, and let not thine heart be glad when he stumbleth.
So rejoice not when thine enemy falleth. Don't let your heart be glad when you see your enemies stumble. All right. Megan, would you read Proverbs 25, verses 21 and 22?
If thine enemy be hungry, give him bread to eat, and if he be thirsty, give him water to drink. For thou shalt heap coals of fire upon his head, and the Lord shall reward thee.
What was that verse?
20, Proverbs 25, 21 and 22. If your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat. If he's thirsty, give him water to drink. Kind of sounds like we should be going out of our way for our enemies. For thou shalt heap coals of fire upon his head. You ever heard kill him with kindness? It kind of seems like that's what he's talking about.
I think it's to bring conviction to them.
Yeah. All right, well, let's look to see what Christ has to say, and we'll look at Matthew 5, verse 44. Matthew 5, 44, yeah.
But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you.
So just as Christ said, we ought to love our enemies and bless them that curse you. And then,
Seth, the one about keeping coals of fire in their head, I never understood that very well. I thought it was kind of like a ha-ha, you know what I mean? I do this for you, so then you do something bad, you know what I mean? Keeping coals
Yeah.
of fire in the head, you can get burned. But it doesn't. It's like, it says to cause someone to feel remorse by returning good for evil. So it's like you want good for them. That's why you're doing it, because you do want good for them, so they can maybe feel and, you know, that conviction to be turned around, you know.
Yeah.
So I thought that was good. I always thought it was odd. Like, why would, if we're supposed to do good to someone, why would we want to heap coals of fire on their head? So, anyway, that was good.
but yeah, and it's a good perspective to have, because if you don't get a response of gratitude, it doesn't matter, because you didn't do it for that. You did it because you ought to care about them and make sure they have what they need. All right. Matthew, would you read Luke chapter 6? We'll read verse 27 and 35, please.
But I say unto you which hear, love your enemies, do good to them which hate you. In verse 32 you said?
35.
35. But love ye your enemies, and do good and lend, hoping for nothing again. And your reward shall be great, and ye shall be the children of the highest. For he is kind unto the unthankful and to the evil.
And Mrs. Hopp, would you read Romans 12, 20 and 21? That was loud.
Romans 12:20. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in so doing, thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good.
Kind of reiterating what Mrs. Pimano just brought up. Don't be overcome with the evil from your enemies, but overcome them with good. Do good to others. So from the verses that we just read, who is referred to as our neighbor?
All right.
Our enemies is, Christ is referring, well, not Christ in all the verses, but in some of them, but our enemies are referenced as our neighbors.
They're in the mix.
What's that?
They're in the mix.
They are in the mix. Everyone is. Just as Sister Rose kind of said, neighbors, pretty much in reference, not pretty much, neighbors in reference to everyone.
No one's left out.
All men. Okay. Let's look at a couple more verses to see who else may be included in neighbor. We'll turn back to Exodus 22. Mr. Hop, would you read Exodus 22 and 21, verse 21?
Exodus what?
Exodus chapter 22, verse 21.
Thou shalt neither vex a stranger nor oppress him, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt.
You were also strangers. So vex not stranger. Leviticus 19:34. Daniel, are you able to read that?
Yeah. Team 34, you said?
Yes.
It says, "But the stranger that dwelleth with you shall be unto you as one born among you. And thou shalt love him as thyself, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God."
And then Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 19. I think we're back up to the front, Mr. B. If you're able to read that.
Sure. Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 19. Love ye therefore the stranger, for ye are strangers in the land of Egypt.
And then real quick, we'll just read Matthew 25. Matthew 25 and verse 35.
Matthew 25:35.
Yes.
For I was hungry and you gave me meat, I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you took me in.
So from these verses, who can we see is included as our neighbor?
Stranger.
Stranger. Someone you don't know, like Daniel said, the people you're around, though you may not know them. So we see that, well, I'll go ahead and ask, who is in reference when we say neighbor, love your neighbor as yourself? Who is that in reference to? We've already said the answer 100 times. Everyone. The answer is everyone. Everyone's included. Your enemies and your strangers, as we just read, your family, your co-workers, fellow church members. Simply summed up, it is your fellow man, the people you are around. I like that answer. So let's look at the love that we owe to our neighbors. Love for others is enforced by the law of God, who obey the laws. Well, to love another would be to obey the law. It is also enforced by the fact that love is of God and that God is love. We turn to 1 John chapter 4.
First John,
Yes, 1 John chapter 4 and verses 7 and 8.
Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone that loveth is born of God, and knoweth God. He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love.
So love is of God. God is love. Now, this love for others is a manifestation of a renewing of your heart, of a new birth, a manifestation of a personal knowledge of God. Just as we read in verse 8, He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. It is a manifestation of discipleship. This is loving others as ourselves is the way we can identify ourselves with Christ. We'll turn to John 13, verse 35. Are you able to read that, Chris?
By this shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you have love one to another.
So we can identify ourselves with Christ by loving others as ourselves. This love for others is a byproduct of the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, and a byproduct of the teaching of God. Let's go to 1 Thessalonians 4:9. Daryl, are you able to read 1 Thessalonians 4:9 for us?
First Thessalonians 4:9.
Yes.
Touching brotherly love, you do not that I write unto you, for ye yourselves are taught of God to love one another.
So we are taught to love one another by God. The love that we owe to our neighbor would include a proper esteem of ourselves. It includes a proper esteem of ourselves, not thinking too highly of ourselves, and keeping others before ourselves. It includes, well, let's go ahead and read Proverbs 11:12. So showing our love to our neighbors can begin by us keeping others before ourselves. Are you able to read Proverbs 11:12?
Yep, Proverbs 11:12. Got to throw my spectacles on, sorry. Has here, he that is void of wisdom despiseth his neighbor, but a man of understanding holdeth his peace.
And then we'll read Proverbs 14, verse 21.
He that despiseth his neighbor sinneth, but he that hath mercy on him, mercy on the poor, happy is he.
All right, this love for others also includes a sympathy for others. Let's turn to Isaiah 58 and verse 7.
Where?
Isaiah 58:7. I think we're back up to the front, Megan.
It is not to deal thy bread to the hungry, and that thou bring the poor that are cast out to thy house. When thou seest the naked, and that thou cover him, and that thou hide not thyself from thine own flesh.
So we ought to take care of those in need, give bread to the hungry, covering to the naked, and help those that are in need, as we would want help for ourselves. Along with that verse, we see that it not only includes a sympathy for others, but it includes a helpfulness. It includes bearing burdens for one another. We'll turn to Romans 15, chapter 1.
We then that are strong ought to bear the infirmities of the weak, not to please ourselves.
This love includes a kindness. Colossians 3:12.
Forbearing one another and forgiving one another. If any man have a quarrel against any, even as Christ forgave you, so also do ye.
The love for others would include a compassion for others. And we'll look at 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 8.
Finally, be all of one mind, having compassion one of another, love as brethren, be pitiful, be courteous. Pity.
And it includes prayer. We'll look at 1 Timothy chapter 2. We'll look at the first 3 verses. 1 Timothy chapter 2.
I exhort therefore that first of all supplications, prayers, intercessions, and giving of thanks be made for all men, for kings, and for all that are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty. For this is good and acceptable in the sight of God our Savior.
So, how ought we love our neighbor? In what way should we love our neighbor?
Be as helpful as you can.
Be as helpful as you can, yeah?
If they need something, if you've got it, let it to them.
Do
Lend
it
a helping
earnestly.
hand. What's that?
Do it earnestly.
Earnestly? What did you say?
In love.
As you would want to be treated.
Yes, as you were one to be treated. All very good answers. That was the one I was looking for. We ought to love our neighbors as ourselves. Let's look at Leviticus 19:18. I think we're back up, Mr. V.
Thou shalt not avenge, nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord.
So we ought to love our neighbor as ourselves. Just as the other points that were brought up, if we were in need or if we needed something, obviously we would want to be treated with that love. So to remember that, to treat others as we would want to be treated, to love others as we love ourselves. The self-love is active and it's habitual. Every day we're awake and we know, we are aware of our needs. We make sure that we have what we need. We don't leave our house in the morning without the things we need for the day. We would go out of our way to make sure we have what we need. So Christ is saying to actively and habitually love others. make sure that they have what they need for themselves. And don't leave them unless you know they have what they need. So self-love causes one to be concerned about your own welfare. And we'll do what it takes to make sure that we stay healthy, make sure we have things that we need to stay healthy, to live right. You know, we're going to make sure we have our toothbrush and toothpaste to take care of our oral health. We're going to make sure we have whatever supplements you need to stay healthy. You'll go out of your way to make sure you have what you need. You know, if your car breaks down, you try to get to the shop immediately. And then that's first priority is taking care of what's wrong. But do we make other people's problems and others' welfare, we keep that as our number one priority? And do we take care of others' needs over our own? Christ elaborated upon the commandment to love our neighbor in Matthew chapter 7, verse 12.
Matthew 7:12. Therefore, all things whatsoever you would that men should do to you, do you even so to them, for this is the law and the prophets.
With these words, Christ states a principle of action with regard to others. With one simple precept for the regulation of our conduct towards others, essentially he's saying put yourself in others' place, in another person's place, or put yourself in their shoes, we might say, and then act towards them the way that you would want them to act towards you in that same situation or circumstance. So he's saying to treat others the way you want to be treated. And that is the exact opposite of our selfish and self-centered and self-pleasing, self-indulgent nature. But it is an important precept and principle that we must follow, and it would benefit everyone. If everyone treated others the way that they wanted to be treated, it would improve the life of everyone. If this was something that everyone obeyed and followed, it would make a significant difference worldwide. This precept teaches and reminds us that we are not only ones that matter. We are not the only ones that matter, and the world does not revolve around us. It reveals to us, and this might be a controversial thought, probably wouldn't jive with a lot of people now, but you were created for a purpose, and it was not for yourself. We are here to live for and serve the Lord, and to serve others, just as Christ did while he was on the earth. The King of the universe came to earth not to be worshipped, but to work. He served others his whole life, and the purpose of his life was to bring glory to God and to give his people a way to escape the bounds of hell. So what did Christ do while on earth besides die for our sins? Well, he loved everyone he came in contact with. He treated everyone with love and respect, and he served others. He washed his disciples' feet, and he healed many, many people that we are told about. His entire life was a service to others and to God. He is the perfect example of what our lives ought to be towards man and towards God. We have a responsibility to God and towards others. So quickly we'll look at our love to our neighbors as it relates to the commandments. Love to our neighbors sums up the second table of the Ten Commandments. The commandments of the second table are as follows. And I'm going to go through them, and I will award a point to anyone that can give me an example of how love is the summary of that law. So if you can give an example of how love fulfills the law, then I will award you a point. So the first one we'll look at is to honor thy father and thy mother. So how does love play into honoring thy father and thy mother? Daniel. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mrs. P. Go ahead.
No, go
Sorry.
ahead, Dan. I'm good.
All right. you guys can't decide, I'll give it to Mrs. B, she raised it.
By being obedient.
By being obedient, yeah. What were you guys gonna say? Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'll give a point to everyone that answers, so if someone has a different example or a different answer, you can both give it. You can both
I
give
was
a
just
point.
gonna say, to truly honor, you have to do it without spite and without your own pride getting in the way, so it has to be out of love, because respect, you honor by respect, and respect is won by love, and you can't have a true honor and reverence without having a true love and respect.
It's not honoring to your parents just to obey, but to obey with a good attitude, and to do it, to honor them, yeah. All right, Mrs. P, you had your hand up. I see you too, I'll get to you.
I think it's to do, even though you don't wanna do what
Yeah,
your
absolutely.
parents want you to, but you've got to do what they want you to, no matter what.
Because you love them, you want to honor them, so you want to be obedient. Yeah, absolutely. All right, Mrs. P.
Taking care of them when they're old.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, this was one of the things that I remember was long life. Honoring your father and your mother leads to long life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was.
Mrs. Hop, you had your hand up.
Daniel kind of covered what I was saying.
No. All right. Okay, well, that's good. Good answers. Anybody else want to throw one in for a point? Chris?
Because the Lord commanded it.
Well, that's a good answer, yeah. Not really,
I know.
not really looking for more like, for love. But I wrote down, we will fulfill this law because we love them as ourselves. We will have a desire to please our parents, to honor them, even when they're not around. So even, not talking bad about your parents to your friends or even other people. If you don't agree with, as you get older, maybe you don't believe the same things your parents believe, but do you talk badly about them to others because they believe different, or do you honor them? Because it doesn't say to honor your father and your mother if they're Christians. It says to honor your mother and your father. All right, our next one is thou shalt not kill. Now, Christ also made this law to mean thou ought not hate your brother without cause, hold a grudge against them. So I'll open that up. But how can we fulfill this law with love? Thou shalt not kill. Daniel.
Well, the opposite of hate is love, so obviously to not murder, to not hate, we to have to love them. So,
If you truly love someone as yourself,
yeah.
the thought of hating them or holding a grudge against them probably wouldn't.
Causing harm.
Yeah, you're not gonna want to cause harm. Yeah, for sure. Anybody else?
Be forgiving.
Being forgiving, not holding that grudge, but letting it go because you love them as yourself, for sure. Mrs. B?
Just when you've been wronged and truly wronged, just to love them anyway.
Yeah, that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say.
I don't know if anybody watched the Lions game, but they were wrong last night. I gotta say, I don't know. We need to bring sports into this, but they were wrong. And I was maybe not feeling brotherly love towards the officials in that game, hopefully. But we have to love them because we were commanded. Does anybody else have an example? We'll move on to the next one.
I have a sports example.
Uh-oh. Okay.
Senior year, Casey's senior year, we're losing in double overtime, and we feel like it was a couple wrong, some wrong calls. It was pretty hard. It was hard on us. We were upset. But to really, go back and say that I believe that obviously the Lord is in control. And what did the other team need? They needed that win more than us for some reason. You know what I mean? And a couple years later, I got a letter from a person about the thought of some really hard things that team was going through during that process. And it just kind of put it into perspective of,
You don't know.
it was a game. It's okay.
Yeah, you don't know what it was going through, but also now, looking
Yeah.
back, that was 10 years ago, wasn't it? Almost. 9 years. So, I mean, now it's kind of like, maybe it still hurts a little, it burns a little, but when you put it in perspective with life, it was a high school basketball game.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, to lose a testimony over that probably wouldn't be worth it.
And to remember, God's always at work. Like, even in those times, God is at work somewhere or another. We don't know, but we can trust him.
Yeah.
Okay, Lord, I will trust you with this.
Yeah, for sure.
Even when.
Any other ones? All right. Our next one is thou shalt not. Does anybody know what the next one is?
Commit adultery.
Thou shalt not commit adultery. Good job, Cam. So how can that law be fulfilled by love?
Well, if you love your spouse, then it's not even gonna be a consideration.
Right? That's what I wrote down. That was one thing I wrote down for it. Yeah. If you truly love your spouse as yourself, you wouldn't want your spouse to be committing adultery or lusting after someone else, so you ought not either. Make sure Matthew gets a point for that. Any others?
Not putting yourself in a position where that could possibly happen, like being alone with somebody else, or even, looking at things you shouldn't look at.
Yeah. Just avoiding those situations. Proverbs says don't even go down the street of the, I don't know what the word they use, but prostitute, I guess you could say. Don't even go down there. If you know she's down there, why would you even go down there? Just avoid it entirely. Just stop. You had your hand up.
Well, I thought also, adultery, also with the Lord, not to have our hearts against.
Lusting after something else.
Yeah, things that don't pertain to him.
Yeah.
I'm having trouble with words, but that's, it's in my head.
This one's a little touchy too, because it's kind of, can be a little different, but I liked Matthew's answer and I answered that. Somebody was about to say something?
Wouldn't that be the way you dress too?
That's what I wrote down too. If you truly have love for others, you're gonna consider how you dress, how you're dressed in public, because you don't want someone else, you don't want to be a stumbling block for someone else. Yeah, absolutely. Any others? Make sure. All right.
I guess I am.
Okay.
People can use that kind of as a way to take advantage of people if they know that they have either a stroke here or like, if they know that they can use that against you, you wouldn't want to be used, so you don't want to use others. Like,
Yeah.
and, like, exploit that.
For sure. Thou shalt not steal. How does love fulfill that law? Or how can that law be fulfilled? How can we fulfill that law with love? Thou shalt not steal.
All kinds of them.
There's a lot.
Your time, for your employer.
Yeah.
And that, a lot of times is just between you and the Lord.
Yeah, it's easy to do. I mean, especially in situations, if you're like working the trades and you're the only one on the job, nobody knows what time you got there. Nobody knows if you're actually getting anything done. You're there alone. So that's definitely takes some integrity, but yeah.
And it's respect also for whoever.
Your employer, it's love for your employer and for the Lord.
It doesn't matter who it is, just.
Yeah, to have that honest testimony too. I think employers respect it too. If they know you're being honest, or if you say, hey, yeah, I was there alone, I showed up 30 minutes late, and you write that down, or I got there, but I went a little over on my lunch break, so yeah, I clocked out for longer. I think they see that, and you'll be respected for it, if not rewarded. But that's a good one, because it's not so blatant. Obviously, there's blatant ones. I mean, if you love a store owner as yourself, you're not going to take something from them, or someone leaves their purse out, you're not going to take something out of their purse if you love them as yourself. Are there any other ones?
Well, not taking, say you have supplies at your house, and you think, well, they're not gonna miss a tape measure or a couple extra pencils or whatever.
Yeah.
Things like that, little things that are still stealing.
It's still not being honest and stealing. Whereas even if you just ask, hey, can I have a couple pencils? They'd probably be like, yeah, I don't care.
Yeah.
What does it cost? 50 cents. But to take it and assume you can have it, or extra material at a job site, there's a ton of stuff. I'm definitely taking stuff out of the dumpster without asking, because I feel like at that point, they don't want it. I don't feel that that's stealing. But if it's still laying around the job or still inside the house stacked up, it's not up for grabs.
It can also be for other things, like, it could be, like, don't steal somebody's, like, I guess what they would say is, like, their moment. Like, if somebody has something to say in there, like, it's their right to say something, it's not your right to steal, like, the spotlight, or, like, to try to take that thing from them, like, somebody has something exciting to say, and you know it too, and they're about to say, and you're like, whoa.
Speak over them.
It's like, you need to
Yeah.
hold your tongue and
Definitely.
not steal that from them. Doesn't have to be anything physical.
And
Emotional.
yeah, that's a good one. I had down the thought too that if we're not sharing with others the things the Lord has blessed us, if we're not being generous with them, is that stealing? Because our possessions we have in the world, are they really ours? Or is it just earthly possessions the Lord has let us have? You know, I heard somebody say once, they would let us use their house all the time. And we would always say thank you. And they're like, it's not our house, it's the Lord's house. We just live in it. And I really like that perspective on things, that what we have is not ours, it's the Lord's. Like our vehicle. If we're not willing to let someone borrow a vehicle, is that stealing? You know, we're not kind of being a little possessive. Maybe it's not stealing, but it's just a thought I had.
Yeah, it kind of goes with tithing as well.
Yeah.
It's the Lord. He says it's robbery.
Definitely. All right, thou shalt not bear false witness. How can that law be fulfilled by love?
Keeping your mouth shut when you shouldn't say something.
That's a good place to start. Proverbs says even the fool is thought wise, keeps his mouth shut. Not that. Doesn't say it quite like that. That's my
Oh, it goes to the fact that you wouldn't want to spouse spread rumors or bad things about yourself. You're supposed to let your enemy or the stranger or the one around you, or the neighbor, yeah, you probably don't do that.
The one thing I see a lot in the trade is when someone asks what happened, like why is this in this condition if it's bad. If someone's not around, everyone blames that person. Oh, I told him he shouldn't do that. Who knows if it really was his fault, but I see blame get passed so much, and it's always the guy that's not there. And I'm like, it's kind of bearing false witness. I mean, we're telling others that, and that might be a lie too, because if we're guilty, but we just don't take the hit, we'll just blame the guy that's not there.
It can correlate with thou shalt not kill or hate. If you were getting, something against you falsely, you have a tendency like you're hating,
Yeah.
It can go along with, well, they deserve it.
Yeah. And just being honest. Someone asks a question about, what happened to this. Not slandering the person that's not there, but being honest. Saying, even if you don't like him, I don't really like him, but to be honest, no, it's not his fault. He didn't do it. What that guy said was a lie. Not bearing a false witness. You could gain a friend through that, and you could be a strong testimony through that. Even if it's someone who doesn't like you, if you're honest. All right, we got one more because we're like, it's almost time for church. So maybe I should just skip it. But thou shalt not covet. I just wrote down, if someone was to win a lot of money, would you be excited for them or be upset that they got it and not you? Not being covetous or jealous of what others have, being happy for them. You have to celebrate with others. I guess if anybody has one, say it quick. Go ahead.
Well, ultimately, if you covet, you are not being thankful for the Lord's words for you.
You're not grateful for what you have. Yeah.
So you ought to be happy for sure. I think that's easier said than done in a sense, but, godliness is great. How's it, godliness? I can't pronounce it.
Contentment.
Contentment with godliness is a great gain. That's one of my verses I try to lay claim on.
If we're too busy looking at what other people have and wish we had that, we forget what we have.
Yeah, that green grass on the other side of the fence,
Yeah, for sure.